Okay, thank you so much for coming out today. What we're going to talk about I am Angie Makomenaw. I'm from the Counseling and Psychological Services. And what we're going to do today is do an introduction with my colleagues because we're doing a wellness panel. So I'm actually zooming in from New Haven. And I want to pose a question for everybody. What is the one thing you are secretly pleased that you don't have to do now that you are physically distancing? And for me, I have a lot less clothes to wash because my family has refused to change their clothes on a daily basis. So that means just one load of laundry. But let me have the other panelists also tell me where they're zooming in from and their roles on campus.
So, hi, my name is Dr. Smith Kidkarndee. I am a clinical psychologist at CAPS. I'm also the assistant director at CAPS. I'm zooming in from Glastonbury, Connecticut. I think one of the things I enjoy or secretly enjoy about being at home or physically distancing is that I can wear my gym shorts while I am providing care while also engaging in this conversation, while also still looking very professional from the bottom up with my scarf and all. So thank you all for joining us today.
Made me laugh, Dr. K. My name is Priya Senecal. I am a licensed professional counselor and a full-time psychotherapist with CAPS. And something that I am secretly enjoying about distancing right now is that I have a quite lengthy commute to campus under normal circumstances. So I'm enjoying not having to spend an extra couple of hours every day in the car.
Great, thank you so much. I apologize. My name is Angie Makomenaw. I'm the mental health prevention. I'm the mental health education and prevention coordinator. I'm new to CAPS, and it's a new position. And part of that is actually doing this type of programming. So get a little bit into it. So CAPS actually is located in Davison Health Center, but you can also find us online and through the phone. You can actually call right now, and a clinician will be able to help you and support you if you need assistance. We have a variety of clinicians who are very passionate about the work and all have their specialties. But I just want to kind of stress the fact that we are there for you. If you are more comfortable with maybe working with a clinician that is in the state that you're located, or maybe a clinician off campus, we also have a great resource on our website. It's a tab that's called Thriving Campus, and it actually can look up clinicians within the area that will accept your insurance, know what their specialties are and what their capacity is, and they can also connect with you. And we can help you out with that as well. All you have to do is call, and we can help figure out what options you have and what best support you. With that being said, I just want to promote one more thing, is that we are in a time that's unusual. And with that, I don't want to have the elephant in the room, but we are going through a collective global panic. And so some of the tips that we've created, hopefully be something useful. Again, if this sparks a different thought pattern, or if you think of something else or want more questions, please reach out to us. You can reach us by email. You can also call the office. All those are options, and we can provide you further support if you need that. So I want to address the elephant in the room, so to speak, is that we need to keep in mind all of these tips and suggestions that we're coming up with. It's because we're in this crisis. But these tips and tools that we're going to talk about can be used anytime, not just during a pandemic, but it's skills that hopefully that will help not only today, but tomorrow as well. So one of the things that we want to talk about is it's a grief and loss going on right now, and it's a grief and loss over some of our we no longer can easily go to the store. We have to take several measures in order to do so. There is the grief and loss of what we expected over this semester, what that was going to look like, how is that going to be, maybe the loss of aspect of connections that we normally would have, that no longer that we're virtually doing it versus the actual physical. I know quite a few friends of mine who are big huggers that they're really struggling right now, that they can't just hug the people that they love the most right now, especially when they are physically distancing. So to just recognize, and the fact that we are going through a shared experience in this regard. And it is a lot of things that come up with the grief and loss are similar feelings that might be coming up today around it, as far as anger or denial, or I mean, I know I've gone through several of like, is this really real? Those aspects. And so it is okay to feel those things and to recognize why we're feeling this at the same time. One of the things that out is actually about what is in our control and what is not in our control. So for example, the weather isn't in our control, whether it's going to be a sunny day or a rainy day. But I do have the control over what I wear that day, as far as if I'm going to bring an umbrella or my rain jacket versus shorts and sunglasses. You know, what is the difference and what can I do? Some of the other things is how I take in, for example, the news. I have no idea why I did this, but I've had a Twitter account but never utilized it until now. It is that I don't know what I was thinking, but I have noticed that, for example, if I start scrolling through Twitter right before I go to bed, I'm gonna have a harder time getting to sleep. So maybe minimizing it, or looking at Twitter at the beginning of the day or a break during the day versus at the very end when you're trying to relax and calm yourself and go to sleep. It could be the things, or even limiting some of the choices that you have. I know for me, I have some family members that it is best, I don't want to block them, but I can mute them. So when I want to connect with them, I connect with them on my terms versus necessarily them popping up in my news feeds. So those are kind of the different things. Even like, I love getting my news from late night TVs. I need it with the humor and the sarcasm some days versus, you know, the straight facts that come in. And so I really appreciate those media sources versus maybe listening to NPR. So figuring out what is in your control and what isn't in your control can make a huge difference, because a lot of things may seem like it's out of our control, but there is quite a few things that we still have in control, and how we can incorporate it and focus on those. Another aspect that can be helpful is reframing. A lot of times people think, well, it's just being positive. It's not necessarily that. It's reframing it to make it seem a little bit more tangible, more something that, I mean, you could use the glass is half full or glass half empty analogy, but it's really trying to figure out another way of doing things. So it's interesting. I recently did a couple Zoom calls, one with an entire set of family members and another with a good friend of mine. And my friend, who lives in Salt Lake, we're like, why haven't we done this sooner, right? Why haven't we connected this way? Because we don't see each other this often. Why did it take a situation right now in order to connect? So reframing some of the relationships I have, in that I'm not losing those relationships, but I am creating new connections using technology that I hadn't used before. Not because I didn't have the technology, I just never thought of it that way. I never reframing it that way. Other things like taking the positivity, as far as my partner cooks a lot more meals now that we are home, and we've noticed that we actually eat dinner earlier and get to go to bed earlier than before, where before we're like kind of scrambling when we get home, trying to get everything settled, and then being able to focus on food. And so now it's been a reframing of our days, and looking at it at a different angle. And that's really what it is when it comes to some of the things that are going on, we can reframe it into a different dynamic, if that makes sense. I have is what I just touched on it earlier, faces, is that the scrolling aspect. I've noticed that sometimes when I'm sitting in front of the TV watching, just, I do watch The Masked Singer. I'm not afraid to say it, but I'll be sitting through that and I will scroll through my stuff while I'm sitting there on the couch. And so I noticed that if I do something else, so if I'm doing I do beadwork, and so sometimes doing beadwork while I'm sitting on the couch is a better way for me to keep my hands busy, but focus on and being present, versus the scrolling that could be anxious building, anxiety building, based on who I'm watching and who I'm not watching. So this is just a list of different alternatives that might be more helpful, depending on how you normally scroll and when often do you do it or don't do it, that sort of thing, and figuring out which is the best space. Like I said, trying to I've also tried to stop doing the scrolling right before bed and instead reading a book to make it a little bit easier and palatable. So instead of doing that random scroll, because I've noticed that even on Facebook, yes, I still have Facebook, I'm old, but even on Facebook, I can still, I'll start flipping through it, and you're like, oh, this is, and you go down this rabbit hole, and it's like an hour later, and you're like, I should have done the bed. Because even having good sleep habits is a huge help. That will help with the anxiety itself. So I'm always big on the sleep aspect. But figuring out what is helpful and what is not helpful can make a huge difference when it comes to some of the behaviors that we automatically do, and switching it up just a little bit. And there's quite a few meditation apps. A lot of them are free. If you want any recommendations, we do have it on our CAPS website. If you go to Wesleyan/CAPS, and if you click on, there is app section on there, there's a tab, and there's also some great videos if you want to do like a guided meditation with Dr. K. He's available on there as well under our CAPS at Home. So those are just some of the few little tips that I was thinking along, but I'm going to turn this over to Dr. K, and he's going to talk a little bit further about some of the tips that he has. So thank you.
Thank you, Angie. So let's take a mindful moment together by doing soothing touch. One easy way to soothe and comfort yourself when you're feeling kind of stressed or overwhelmed is to give yourself a gentle hug, or simply put your hand on your heart and feel the warmth of your hand. It may feel somewhat awkward or embarrassing at first, but your body doesn't know that, right? It just responds to the physical gesture of warmth and care. Research indicates that physical touch releases oxytocin. It provides a sense of security, buffer distressing emotions, and calms cardiovascular stress. If you notice that you're feeling tense, upset, sad, or self-critical, try stroking your arm or just gently rocking your body. What's important is that you make a clear gesture that conveys feelings of love, care, and tenderness. If other people are around, you can often fold your arms in a non-obvious way, gently squeezing yourself in a comforting manner. You can also simply imagine hugging or caressing yourself if you can't make the actual physical gesture in itself. So let's take a moment and try the hand on heart strategy, right? So let's start by taking 3 deep, satisfying breaths. So breathe in and breathe out. Breathe in and breathe out. Breathe in and breathe out. Right. Gently place your hand over your heart, feeling the gentle pressure and warmth of your hand. And if you wish, you can place both hands on your chest, noticing the difference between one hand or 2 hands, right? Feel the touch of your hand on your chest, and if you wish, you could make small circles with your hand on your chest, right? Feel the natural rising and falling of your chest as you breathe in and as you breathe out. Right? Let's breathe in and breathe out. Right? You may choose to kind of linger there for a few more moments. Okay, so let's come back to the present moment. So today I want to share with you an acronym that I think can be quite helpful in creating a framework to kind of navigate the current crisis. Now, the acronym I would like to share with you, it's called FACE, F-A-C-E. We can start with the first one, which is F, focus on what's in your control. The crisis, the current crisis, it can affect us in many different ways. You know, some of us physically, emotionally, economically, socially, and psychologically. when we are facing a crisis of any sort, fear and anxiety are they're quite present, right? They're normal, natural responses to challenging situations, which can be infused with danger and global uncertainty. And it's all too easy to kind of get lost in the worrying and ruminating about all sorts of things that are out of your control. Now, while it's completely natural for us to get lost in such worries, it is not useful or helpful to kind of engage in that kind of thinking, right? Or to get hooked in by that narrative. The more we focus on what's not in our control, the more hopeless or anxious we are likely to feel, right? So the single most useful thing anyone can do in any type of crisis, I think, is really to focus on what's in your control. So with that in mind, what do we do, especially in the here and now, right? But I think that's what makes it so important, right? So what you choose to do in the here and now can potentially be um, uh, what's most helpful or most kind of growth driven, right? We can really make a huge difference in navigating this current stressor for yourself, for others, for your community, if we are focusing on actions that are aligned with your values, right? Especially when these actions are growth driven. So, our number one aim is to really think about um, our actions and to think about how we can, in a very optimal way, take control of our behavior. And this involves both dealing with our inner world, right? So navigating all of our difficult thoughts and feelings, and then, of course, the outer world, things that are happening outside of us. Think about navigating all the kind of the very concrete things we are currently facing. So in an ongoing crisis, we're all going to experience this kind of emotional hurricane or storm in which you are experiencing very unhelpful thoughts that are spinning inside your head, as well as navigating some of the painful feelings that might be coming up for you um, inside your body. And if we're not intentional about it or mindful about it, we can be easily be swept away by these thoughts and physical sensations, right? And when that happens, it's a lot harder for us to kind of stay present and engage in actions that would be most growth driven, as well as actions that would be most optimal for you, for people around you, and for your community. So to do that, we are going to look at all the other letters, right? So all the other letters are essentially steps in dropping your emotional anchor, right? It's a very simple formula. It will give you the opportunity to help anchor you when you are trying to decide on what particular actions you would like to partake in, right? So you have A, C, E. So let's start with acknowledge your thoughts and feelings. Um, so when we think about acknowledging your thoughts and feelings, we're thinking about doing it in a very um, compassionate way, right? So silently and kindly acknowledge whatever is showing up for you, especially inside of you, right? These are thoughts, feelings, emotions, memories, sensations, urges. And as you're noticing or as you're acknowledging all of these parts, you want to take a stance of a friendly, curious scientist, right? Observing what's going on in your world. So essentially, you're taking notes, you're collecting data to kind of help inform a much more um, comprehensive narrative, right? And as you do this, often it's helpful to put this into words, right? And silently say to yourself things such as like, oh, I'm noticing my anxiety, or here's grief, or oh, there's my mind worrying again, or I'm having a feeling of sadness, or I'm having thoughts about getting sick. And I think by putting them, these thoughts and feelings into words, one, you can kind of allow these thoughts and feelings to exist outside of the mind, but also gives you an opportunity to kind of track the kind of thoughts you're having, the kind of sensations you're having, the urges, etc. And because language plays such a big part in how we narrate, being able to put it onto paper it makes the experience a little bit more concrete, right? It can actually help us to process some of the very complex thoughts and feelings that we might have day by day, especially when we're dealing with such a, a global crisis. And while you are acknowledging your thoughts and feelings, it is also important for us to come back into your body. And that's the C, to come back into and connect with your physical body. We're more than just the mind. We also, we have the physical body that we have to kind of acknowledge and, um, to take notice of. So it's important for us to find your own ways of connecting with your body. There are a few things you can do. You can, think about ways to kind of ground yourself in the moment. That could be slowly pushing your feet hard into the floor, right, as a way to know that there's a ground beneath you. Another way is to kind of slowly strengthening up your back and your spine. And if you're sitting, this is kind of sitting upright and forward in your chair. Sometimes just you can also slowly pressing your fingertips together just so that you can feel that force, right? So that there are ends to your tips. You can slowly stretch your arms and neck and stretch out your shoulders to alleviate any tension. And you can also kind of slow down your breathing, right? And whenever you take notice of your breathing, it gives you the opportunity to reset your breathing. One of the tools that I shared with some of my students, it was, and there's also a video on it online. It's called The Four Elements of Stress Management: Earth, Air, Water, Fire. Earth is essentially to do anything to ground yourself, and that could be pushing your feet against the ground, and then taking a snapshot of things around you, right? So once you feel grounded by pushing your feet hard into the floor, you're gonna look for 5 things you might see or things you might hear, smell, taste, touch, as a way to ground yourself. So that's the earth element. The air element is the breathing element. So anything that will help you re-regulate your breathing is a tool that you'll use here for air. So this could be the 4-7-8, right? So you're breathing in for 4, holding for 7, and then breathe out for 8. Or you can do the square breathing. That's another way of doing it. And then water. Water is essentially activating the first stage of digestion. When we are feeling overwhelmed and stressed, we are then activating the sympathetic nervous system. And when we activate that, we're not feeling calm or relaxed. So also when you're in that, and when you're activating the sympathetic nervous system, digestion, that's turned off, right? So if we can somehow turn on digestion or that system, we can then turn on the parasympathetic nervous system. So one way to kind of help, activate saliva, production or increase the moisture in your mouth is really think about, anything that's going to increase that. So, when we think about something sour, like, having, sucking on a lemon or a very sour lemonade, or maybe thinking about food that you find tasty, and you start salivating, just by doing that, that is stage 1 of digestion. Thus, you are slowly activating or reactivating the parasympathetic nervous system. So that's water. And then fire. Fire is to light up your imagination. And that essentially is using a more of a mental visualization of a safe and calm place. All right. So this is a great opportunity for you to think about, where is my safe and calm place. And it could be based on fantasy, right? It could be, you know, this magical place in the mountains. It could be by a stream, but you want this place to be fully developed, right? So you're thinking about, well, if I'm at this place, what are things I might see or hear? And maybe what are some of the things I can touch? And you want to create a full fantasy. And it's a great way to, if you're feeling overwhelmed, to kind of retreat to, right? And when you do that, mentally, if you're thinking about a safe and calm place, you are going to feel safe and calm, right? And I think that's part of the mind and body integration, right? So you're never without the mind or you're never without the body. So when we're engaging in tools, we always thinking about how can we maintain that connection, right? So the 4 elements of stress management: earth, air, water, fire. And for those of you who are interested, there is a video of it on the CAPS website. So if you go to the CAPS at home and you click on the vlogs and clips, there is a video that I've uploaded, and it'll give you a much more fuller explanation of earth, air, water, fire. Okay, so that's D. And then E. E is to engage in what you're doing. Once you acknowledge your thoughts and feelings, you come back to the body. It's always important to return to what you were doing before, right? So get a sense of where you are and then refocus your attention on the activity you are doing. And that could be your coursework, and that could, could be playing a game or connecting with a friend. You kind of want to find your own way of doing this. This particular strategy of engaging what you're doing, it's not going to be the same activity for everyone, right? So you kind of want to figure out like what are activities that you might need to do to allow yourself to kind of re-engage in what you are currently doing, we're doing. And so that could be engaging in another set of grounding related activities, right? That could be looking around the room and noticing 5 things you can see, or to notice 3 or 4 things you can hear. Notice that you can smell or taste or sense in your nose or mouth, or notice what you are doing kind of step by step, right? In small parts. And part of this is to give yourself the opportunity to take everything in, right? To give yourself the opportunity to obtain full attention to the task or the activity at hand. And part of this is, again, is to allow yourself to drop your emotional anchor, right? So going back, FACE, you're going to focus on what's in your control, right? And what's in your control in that moment, in the midst of distress, is dropping your anchor. And while dropping your anchor, or to drop your anchor, we are using ACE, ACE, right? These are kind of 3 parts in dropping your anchor, right? So you're acknowledging your thoughts and feelings, you're coming back to your body, and then you're engaging what you're doing so that you can continue to engage in committed actions that are aligned with your values. Okay, and over time, as you are developing additional skills to cope with the current stressor, you'll be able to kind of really integrate FACE in a much more less reactive way, right? I think as we practice on some of these skills, you'll be able to kind of integrate it into kind of daily functioning. Okay, so that's FACE. So let's move on. So I think this is a great visual diagram of some of the skills I mentioned before, right? So if you take a look at this, you have pay attention to reactions, right? It's normal to experience stress, anger, anxiety, and fear during a crisis, right? I think, again, you're giving yourself the opportunity to kind of acknowledge your thoughts and feelings, right? Without having to be fused with it. You don't have to be pulled in by it. I think it's a much more workable experience when we take a step back and just call it out for what it is and just label it, right? So if you're feeling stressed, angry, frustrated, sad, anxiety, and just take note of it, jot it down, right? Be aware of your reactions. It can help you decide what you need to cope with, right? Again, you're just collecting data, okay? Be kind to each other. Remember that COVID-19 does not recognize race, nationality, or ethnicity. And I think what's important about this construct is just be compassionate. Be compassionate to yourself. Give yourself the opportunity to navigate this current crisis in a very gentle way. Be gentle with others, right? Others are also navigating the same experience. We're all in it together. I mean, as we think about this particular crisis, we're all experiencing this collective loss, and it's taking a toll on all of us in very different ways, right? So as you are navigating this crisis, take a break, find time to pause and relax, right? There is life outside of the current crisis. Even though we are in the midst of it, we can also take moments to kind of like, okay, it's out, it's there. It's not gonna change. It's not gonna, with all the things that are happening, we know that there's an end to this. It might not be tomorrow, but we know there's an end, that it's important for us to find ways to pause as often as possible, right? So make sure to schedule a break and relax, or do things you enjoy, such as meditation, listening to music, coloring, etc., right? This is, I think, a great opportunity for you to pursue hobbies that you weren't able to do, but maybe now you have more time to do so, right? And as you know, again, different coping strategies work for different people, right? So I may have mentioned a bunch of strategies and you're like, I don't know, that's not for me. That's fine. As long as you can either pick one or maybe modify one of them as a way to help you kind of pause and ground yourself, that's workable, right? Maintain a healthy routine. It is important to maintain your regular schedule for sleeping, eating, studying, working, socializing, ... I think the healthy routine here is just maintaining a routine. If you can maintain and recreate a new routine, that's healthy. I think, it's going to take some time to recreate a new routine, but I think that's when, if you allow yourself to be gentle, we don't have to recreate a new routine overnight, right? We're talking about baby steps here. One of the things I do that I think it's important to keep in mind, and that is essentially your basic needs. These are things that we can't really create a routine until you satisfy your basic needs, and maybe we can fuse your basic needs with your routine, right? And your basic needs would be sleeping, eating, physical activities, and socializing. And we know socializing is a little bit trickier this time around, and part of it is because of physical distancing. But I also know that we are very creative and adaptable creatures, so that, finding ways to socialize using technology, although it is different, however, I think it's still a great way for us to modify and adjust how we choose to interact with each other. So maybe we can't do it face to face, but we can find, using technology, to still maintain that social connection. And that could be like FaceTime or Google Chat or Hangout, etc., to facilitate that sense of community, or just to remind us that we are still socially connected. And that is something we can also incorporate as part of our routine. Limit information. I believe Angie talked about that, right? So limiting how much, how much FaceTime you are choosing to participate in can be extremely important, right? Just something to note, when you are using your laptop, the TV, your cell phone, there's a lot of blue light, and that in itself can disrupt sleep. It affects your eyes as well. And so it's something to be mindful of. In addition to that, there's a lot that's happening. And so when you are, scrolling through Twitter or Facebook or CNN, it's just information overload, right? So according to some of the studies I've looked at, for example, with the American Psychological Association, they're recommending to limit, no more than an hour of any news related content, right? So not only that, I would, be mindful and selective of what I choose, or what I consider as news or what I consider as data, right? So if you're interested about COVID-19, then I would go to like CDC or look at empirically based research studies to learn more about it, right? So limit information, and then again, connect with others. I think that's also very important, right? So when in distress, you may feel lonely and isolated, um, which again is not too surprising, especially with all the physical distancing that we're doing right now, and it's much needed, right? Um, with the physical distancing, um, but I think that it's important for us to find other ways to socially connect with each other, and that again, that could be um, calling each other on the phone, or having Zoom lunch meetings, or maybe doing a physical activity together, or even going for a run and having FaceTime up and running, right? So that's something to kind of really think about. um, I think this particular crisis is um, will encourage us to interact with each other in a very unique, interesting way. But I think it is a challenge. I'm hoping that you all see it as a challenge to how do I, or how do we as a group stay as social beings as much as possible, while also not having that physical connection, right? One of the things that I've noticed over time is that there's that cognitive dissonance when I am connecting with my colleagues, um, in which we're having this conversation, but then after the conversation, or after like the Skype session, I'm feeling very exhausted and tired. And I think that is part of the dissonance, where the brain is working so hard to recreate the overall experience, because we're so used to connecting with people, not just emotionally, but also with people physically, people that are within the proximity. So when that's lacking, the brain is working so hard to recreate that experience. So even when we are socializing using technology, please give yourself the permission to take breaks from that too, right? The brain is um, it's working on overdrive just to kind of fill our, some of the gaps that we're currently experiencing right now, right? So be gentle to yourself and to your brain, okay? Good. So let's take a look at the next slide. And so I found this amazing kind of GIF or picture on Facebook. And I think what's great about it, it's a set of 6 questions. And these 6 questions can be helpful in, as a set of concrete tools for creating kind of a daily anchor, right? So when you're using these 6 questions, it can be extremely helpful in kind of help you generate ideas as to how to be as present as possible day by day, right? So you have the first question as to what am I grateful for today, right? Who am I checking in on or connecting with today? And that's the kind of the social component. What expectations of normal am I letting go of today, right? The notion of the deviation of how we used to do things, right? But also knowing that because of the situation, we are letting go. And by doing so, it again gives you that sense of, hey, wait a second, I'm still the director. I'm still in control. Question 4, how am I getting outside today? Because, just because you're physically distancing doesn't mean you can't leave your room, your house, etc., as long as you maintain that, 6 feet? So think about, how am I getting outside today? And I could just be just leaving your room, getting sunlight. And as you know, as human beings, we need the sun. How am I moving my body today? And that's also important, right? Movement is extremely important for our mental health. And that could just be, and that doesn't have to be about like going for a jog or anything. It's just essentially, what can I do in the space. That could be stretching, that could be doing some twists and chin-ups and push-ups, etc. And there's quite a bit to do. I think as of late, a lot of gyms and yoga studios are offering like free YouTube sessions. So there are things that one can watch and do within kind of your own comfort of your own space. So think about, how am I moving my body today? And then what beauty am I either creating, cultivating, or inviting in today, right? Because we as human beings, not only are we social beings, we are also very creative, or creative beings. So I think these 6 questions can be helpful in kind of anchoring your daily, day by day. And something to note, you don't have to do all 6. I think it's something that you can aspire to do, as long as if you're thinking about these 6 questions, that's a win, right? If you're thinking about any one of these, that's a win. If you do one, that's even better, right? So the whole notion of these 6 questions is to give you the opportunity to be as presently focused as much as possible. It gives you the opportunity to be as active as much as possible, but also to do it in a way that is gentle, to do it in a way that is compassionate, but also aligned with the kind of person you would like to be. We don't want this crisis to kind of dictate your actions. We wouldn't want this crisis to somehow make decisions for us, right? We want to exist in this experience as authentic and as genuine as possible, right? And yes, it's a little bit harder, right? Because this situation, the crisis, is asking us to really modify how we choose to be in the space. But I think this is a great opportunity to really think about how you might want to be, how you might want to navigate this challenging situation in a way that is aligned to your own set of values. As we know, our values are not going to waver because of things that are happening outside of us. So if we can kind of use our values to engage in actions that are growth driven, not only will it be workable, it'll be quite sustainable, right? So with that in mind, I believe Priya is gonna take lead on the relationships and wellness, okay? So on that note, I pass the mic over to Priya. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Dr. K, for sharing all you have about making sure to be, all of us are grounded with ourselves and taking care of ourselves in this very difficult time for so many. Again, my name is Priya Senecal. I am a psychotherapist over at CAPS. And for this portion of the wellness panel, I'm going to be talking about relationships and how to kind of nurture relationships to ensure wellness. So as we all know, relationships are absolutely essential. Human beings are social by nature, and our relationships take a lot of hard work. And this can be just under normal circumstances. So now more than ever, as we're recording this, we're practicing social distancing, and we're in the middle of a pandemic. And so it's definitely more complicated, and our relationships are all taking a lot of work to maintain because we're not able to kind of practice them or be involved in them in the same way that we were before all of this happened. And even, aside from a pandemic or not, circumstances can arise in a person's life where the relationships may just shift unexpectedly, right? A friend transfers to another university and you never saw it coming. A partner that you were dating suddenly ends the relationship. Relationships with your caregivers or parents can shift unexpectedly, siblings, right? So add in all of the kind of normal ways that relationships shift. And now, in addition to that, we're working around and everyone's sort of doing the best that they can amidst a pandemic. And it definitely adds another layer of complication for sure. So something that if anyone watching this has ever seen me speak on relationships before, something I always start my talks with is this concept here that on the slide here. In every relationship with another person that we have, there are actually 3 relationships that are happening. And so if I have a friendship with Dr. K, for example, there are three relationships going on in our friendship. There's the relationship that I have to myself, there's the relationship that Dr. K has to himself, and then there's the friendship that we have together. And so to have a balanced, fulfilling relationship with each other, all three of those relationships have to be in good working order. So, during this time, as you watch this, it can be helpful for you to just take a moment and think about how you're taking time to connect with others right now. What are some of the challenges that you face? What are some things that maybe are unique in your life right now that make those challenges particularly hard for you? And that's just a good place to start reflecting. Oh, one other thing I'd like to add, when you think about this concept of, with every one kind of connection you have, there's three going on, it becomes more and more complex the more people you add, right? So when you think about if you come from a family of 4 and then you're trying to work out how your whole family sort of gets along with each other, imagine kind of this three connections to every one person, but then with 4 people, it can add even more complication, which makes the relationships that much more kind of hard, and they take a lot of hard work. So now I'm going to talk a bit about how to set boundaries and sort of the foundational pillars of relationships, and like why those are important and how boundaries can be set. So the 4 pillars of any kind of comfortable, balanced relationship are trust, respect, communication, and consent. And so I'm going to focus a good deal on communication as I talk about boundaries today, but you'll find that as I talk, the other 3 pillars of trust, respect, and consent kind of will easily flow into what we're talking about. So boundaries can be physical, that in kind of involving your personal space or the space of others, how you're using space, how another person uses space. They can be emotional, so how a situation is making you feel, your mood, what's coming up for you. And they can also be digital, so the way in which you may be connecting with someone not in person, but via other platforms like text messaging or social media, but then also using things like images and thinking about how you're using media, how you may be using something someone has sent to you or how they're using something you've sent to them. And that can get quite complicated quite quickly. So one way to set boundaries across all of these platforms, whether they're physical, emotional, or digital, is to use something called an I statement. It's important to know too, just going back a moment, is that our boundaries and kind of what our needs are can shift and change in times of stress. And so, right now we're recording this in a time where we're social distancing. And so that places a lot of stress on people, and their needs and their boundaries may be different now than they were before all of this happened, and then how they will be after when things sort of clear up and get back to kind of more like what they were before. So I think it's important to note that. So anyway, going back to an I statement, I'm going to teach you how to use an I statement. And there's 3 steps. So the first thing that you want to do when you're using an I statement is just say how you feel. So that's a very simple thing to do. You're going to think of an emotion that comes up for you, and you're going to just say how it is that you feel. So it could be, I feel sad. And then the next part of it is going to be talking about when you feel that way. So I feel sad when you go so long without texting me back. So you're saying that you feel sad, and you're saying when you feel sad. And when you say the time in which you feel sad, it's really important to communicate that in a way that isn't blaming or judging the other person for your feelings, but more that it's about you letting them know when it is that you're feeling that way. So if someone was to say, you make me feel sad all the time, that's a very different tone, and it's going to bring up a very different response to the person on the receiving end of that versus I feel sad when you go so long without texting me. So the first step of I statement is saying how you feel, and the second step is when you feel it. And then the third step is making a request of the other person listening to you. So for example, I feel sad when you go so long without texting me back. I'm afraid you don't care. What I need is to hear from you more often so I won't worry so much. So just to kind of break this down into a formula, I feel X when Y. Could you please Z in the future? So that's a really simple strategy that you can use. I encourage you to try it. It's something that you can say to someone in an in-person conversation, or if you're texting with someone, or you can also write it out, and that can be really helpful too, because it can give you some time to think about how it is that you want to say it. So I statements, I highly encourage using them. They're really effective. Okay. This next slide is just some examples of ways in which people can try to stay connected when they're at a distance from each other. So now at the time of this recording, we're all practicing distance from each other. And so here are just some strategies that, you know, between my experiences socially with my friends and family and things I've heard from other students at Wesleyan, these are just some things that have come up in conversations that I've had, ways that people are staying connected now. And I thought it would be helpful to share that with you all. So I found the graphic here on the slide funny because it's sort of showing how people are trying to stay connected and they're not together. It's kind of funny. So some examples of ways that people are staying connected right now, using things like video, right? So FaceTime, Zoom, Skype. I just recently had a Zoom spaghetti dinner with some family and friends, and we all just were in our individual homes and we all made the same meal. We all made spaghetti and were slurping our noodles through the webcam, and it was kind of fun. So it was a way to still feel connected, even though I can't see any of those people face to face right now. It still is nice to sort of share a meal that was the same with people that I care about. Also using things like email, text, phone calls, just any way to stay in touch with people. If you can't talk to them in live time, using, well, with a phone call you could, but like using text and email is another way to just stay in touch with people if you can't talk to them in real time like you could on the phone, or using video calls. Also, social media is a great way to stay connected with people. My 84-year-old grandmother just got Facebook, and that was pretty cool. I know Facebook is, I'm dating myself here talking about Facebook because it's not the necessarily coolest social media platform, but anything that you are feeling is helpful and keeps you connected with people you want to stay in touch with. The next one is just good old-fashioned letters and snail mail. I think when I think about centuries ago, when people would go weeks or months without hearing from their loved ones, they would wait for letters to come in the mail, and that would be their only way of knowing how the person they cared about was doing. And yet there's something very poetic and beautiful about that, and why not bring it back? I think there's something really special about getting something in the mail that's tangible, that you can feel, that you can see another person's handwriting, that they've taken the time to put something together for you, put it in an envelope and send it. That's just old-fashioned, but could be fun and a way to stay connected with other people. The last two are more if you have the ability to go out, depending on where you're located, it may or may not be as workable, but if you can go outside and see other people you know, staying the appropriate space from them so that you're not putting each other at health risk of any kind. I recently I'm fortunate enough to have been able to go for a walk with a dear friend of mine, and we just stayed 6 feet apart and were able to hike together, and that was really nice. So if you have the ability to do that, I encourage you to, because getting outside can be really helpful, as Dr. K mentioned in his portion of the talk. That's really can be really helpful to our wellness. This last one here, drive-through hangouts, another one if you have the ability to be near a drive-through or having a car or just access to a restaurant or takeout of some kind, or even just packing a picnic. But the idea of hopping in a car, getting on your bike, something like that, grabbing food and sitting with other people in your car or on your bike, or just at a distance and sharing a meal, that could be a way to stay connected. So this is, again, a time I just encourage you with these bottom questions to think about what you've been doing to stay connected with others, how it feels, what feels different than maybe how it's been in other times in your life. And then also lastly, just thinking about how you nurture your relationship to yourself. And I know Dr. K mentioned a bit of that in his portion of this talk, but I think it's also just a reminder again, when you think about those 3 relationships to everyone, right? The relationship to the self is so much a part of that. So it's important to keep that in mind as well. Okay, and then this is just another strategy that can be really helpful, and it's really just goal setting. And so if you are wanting something different in your relationships, this is going to be a great thing to listen to right now. We're more likely to accomplish what we want when we can envision what it is that we want. And so right now, I encourage you to really think about what it is that you want in your relationships and writing it down and really making it something that's concrete for yourself, because that can help you move forward and take action to have the kind of relationships that you want to have. I'm also just going to give you some strategies to help goal setting and as it relates to your relationships more successful for you. So one, as I've mentioned, writing it down is the first step, and it can make you more likely to work towards your goals. If you write it down, you say it out loud, you share it with someone else, right? It brings up another level of accountability, either for yourself or if you have someone else you've shared it with, then they can also support you and help hold you accountable to whatever that goal is. Within the context of relationships, this can also be the case. The other thing that it's important to think about when you're thinking about setting a goal or the kinds of things you want in your relationships is starting small. If what you're wanting is so large and so much all at once, it may be hard to attain it. And then you may be less likely to be able to kind of follow through with it. And so setting a goal for yourself that's small enough that it feels realistic, like you can do it, and then being able to take small steps towards that goal. So for example, if you wanted to set a relationship goal that you wanted to reach out to 2 friends a week, that seems like a more kind of reasonable number of people to get in touch with than if somebody said, I want to reach out to every single person that I follow on Instagram every week. And let's say they follow hundreds of people. So the difference between version 1 and version 2 is version 1 is one that's more attainable, more realistic, and kind of easier to do. It can also be the case that when goals are set that are small like that, that if for some reason someone has a dip in motivation, they're not really feeling like keeping in touch with their friends, 2 friends is a lot easier to stay in touch with than hundreds of friends. So having it be a smaller amount also just makes it more workable if you're not feeling super motivated. The other thing that can, I have a cat jumping on my lap. The other thing that can be helpful when we're setting goals is a strategy. I don't know what the formal term is for it, but I call it lumping. So it's this idea that if we want to start something new, we lump it with, or we pair it with, I think it might actually be called pairing. But anyway, we lump it with or pair it with something that we're already doing very well. So back to this idea, let's pretend the goal is, I want to reach out to 2 people per week on my friends list just to see how they're doing. This strategy would be, okay, what's something I'm already doing well? Well, okay, when I first wake up in the morning, I'm always looking at my Instagram feed anyway. I do that every day. So since someone's doing that every day, that's a habit that they have that's successful. They do it every day, they don't have to think about it. And so this pairing idea is the idea of taking the thing that they want to do and putting it next to a thing that they're already doing well. So another one could be like brushing your teeth, right? So if you brush your teeth twice a day, trying to set something up that you want to do with something that you're already doing successfully. So that's just a great strategy to try to stick to some of the goals that you have. And especially when it comes to relationships, it can be helpful and another way to hold yourself accountable to getting what you want. So the rest of the slide here is just really helping you envision what it is that you want. by asking you some open-ended questions to think about it. So what does it look like? Like, what do you want your relationships to be like? What do they look like? Why is it important to you? How can you make that happen now? What's one action step that you can take today? And then here, I'm just encouraging everyone to just come up with one small promise that they can make to themselves to nurture their relationships with others or with the self. And so here's just an example. I'm going to make sure I call my grandmother this week to say hello, or I'm going to write about my feelings in a journal. And so I encourage you to think about, what is it that you want to be better in your relationships? And what's a promise you can make to yourself of one small thing that you can do to start to make that happen? And then I'm going to close my portion of the talk just with a self-compassion break, and I'm going to read a Buddhist loving kindness meditation as a way to close, and really thinking about the ways in which we nurture all of our relationships with ourselves and our relationships with others. Okay, I took this loving kindness meditation from this book. It's called Trauma Stewardship. It's a book for healthcare providers, but I really think that this is a very beautiful way of capturing a lot of what's been happening in the world right now, and I hope you like it. May I be free of suffering and the roots of suffering. May you be free of suffering and the roots of suffering. May we be free of suffering and the roots of suffering. May I find peace and the roots of peace. May you find peace and the roots of peace. May we find peace and the roots of peace. May I find joy and the roots of joy. May you find joy and the roots of joy. May we find joy and the roots of joy. May I find wellness and the roots of wellness. May you find wellness and the roots of wellness. May we find wellness and the roots of wellness. May I be free. May you be free. May we be free. Thank you so much.